is March 10th, 2011, and we are interviewing John Oatman from Storm Lake, Iowa, at the Communications Center at Buena Vista University. Mr. Oatman was born on July 28, 1927. My name is Lindsey Peterson, and I will be the interviewer along with Jennifer Jacobs. Okay, sir, what were you doing before you entered the service?
Going to school, yeah. Just graduated from high school a year earlier, and then I went to college at Iowa State for about a half a year and turned 18 and drafted.
What year were you drafted in?
Well, let's see, 44 is when, no, not 44 is when I graduated from high school, and I was, okay, so it'd be 45 is when I was drafted. I turned 18 in 45, and they took me.
How did you feel about being drafted?
It was a thing to do back then. Everybody wanted to get in the war effort. I was too young for the actual fights, or whatever you want to call them, because I got in on the later part of the war.
When you went to boot camp, can you tell us what that was like?
You know, it went so darn fast you forget what it was. I can remember the long walks. Today, a long walk is about 20 feet, but back then I remember from bivouac, after 6 weeks of an intensive training, then they had another 10 or 12 mile hike back to the camp, and that was pretty long. I remember that, but otherwise you meet a lot of people. You think you're going to keep in touch, but you know, in 6 weeks and up at 5 every morning, you don't have too much time to get addresses and stuff like that. So that basically is. I can still remember my corporal's name, though. Corporal Poch, P-O-C-H, I think is the way it was spelled from then. Did you want more? Or?
When you were drafted, what branch were you drafted into?
That was the Army.
Mm-hmm.
I remember more about that, I think, than I do the actual when I was drafted. We had to go to Minneapolis to Fort Snelling, but to get there, we got on a train here in Storm Lake. Took it to Fort Dodge, pretty good train at that time. But then they put us in a car and took the train to Minneapolis, and that was about the roughest train ride I've ever. I can remember that more than I can some of the service connected things. But so that gets us up, past through the bivouac days, or the younger days of my service.
So then, when you were finished with boot camp, did you take a ship over? You were in Japan, weren't you?
No, I was. I'll lead into that. You want me to tell about that now? We were get out of boot camp at Fort Lewis is where I was sent. I didn't mention that. We took a train trip from Minneapolis then, and took that to Fort Lewis, Washington. And where am I going on this? Oh yeah, taking the train, the boot. We took the train over there, and then we were went to this camp, and then we're ready to being shipped out, and they picked two of us out of the company of around 120 or 100, I think there are 120 in a company. They picked two of us out to stay with the headquarters camp, and I think I became I don't I think they pulled us out to I had on my MO that I had taken typing in high school, and at those days not too many men were took typing lessons. So, and this other person with me also had that, and we were put in a headquarters company in Fort Lewis, not knowing what we were doing there. Well, you're a clerk, and so that's what we did. I started by hauling some mail around from different places, and that didn't well. It lasted, but I did that. But then they started getting a lot of. That would have been about the end of the Japanese war, but they're still training people to go over for after the war happenings, and then well, my position, or whatever you want to call it, was there were a lot of soldiers that had been in the service for quite a while and getting their discharge. Well, somebody has to type them up. We don't have any all the electronics that we have now, so that was my job, so to speak, for taking care of the fresh mail that the local people came into, but then also signing or checking the discharge papers for I don't know how many people. I don't sign them as a private, but I did most of the work, and then the captain or the colonel or whomever put his final MO on it, and so that's basically what I did all the time is in the service. And very enjoyable place, if there is such a, if that was the right word, but Fort Lewis, Washington, pretty, very good. And every morning you get up and you can look out of the window or the door and out of the steps and see Mount Rainier in the background. That's the wife and I took a trip around that. What was that, 1980, something like that, about 10, 15 years ago, and it's still there. The mountain is, but it's a lot more clouds, and it wasn't quite as plain as, but it brings back some memories. I didn't really make friends with any people, any lasting friends like some people, but I didn't really get too close. Seemed like he was so busy working, and believe it or not, we did work pretty hard in that department. Yeah.
As your comrades came back from their time overseas, did they tell you any stories of, what they experienced or anything like that? Was their demeanor? Were they, obviously they were cheerful to be back. What was that like?
I was thinking you might ask. I don't remember any, but then they come so fast and they go so fast. But you remember there were stories, but you never know if they're the true stories or not. And so I didn't weigh too much into that fact. So I could not repeat them today. Whatever, I wouldn't remember them as the stories. So that's the way. We aren't getting too many other things here. I can remember going up to Seattle, no, Olympia is where we went. A friend and I managed to get. We stayed overnight and saw the sights. It was after basic, and we managed to find it was a cream holder on a for the coffee, and I brought that with me, and I still got it. We got toothpicks in it. I don't know if Mrs. Oatman knows that's where it came from or not, but we got toothpicks that cream holder now. So a monument or something to remember the Fort Lewis by. Actually, it was in a hotel close to Fort Lewis, Olympia, the capital of the Washington, and so that's where we went on the weekend. We didn't have any breaks for those first 8 weeks during basic. You were just get up at reveille and taps and at night, and then you're waiting for the next day. You do have the weekends off, though. They weren't that bad, but a lot of people going through, and they most all of them came in by boat, so they were getting pretty weary already. You check them in, and then you check them out, like I say, and work on their. And somebody other place else, I didn't have anything to do with the money, but they were paying out cash, and for some of these people, and some just checks, but because they're way behind on the paperwork as far as knowing how much money you got coming. Yeah, can't be much. When they started out at the beginning of the war, $21 a month, but I had a little better than that. I started out when it was $90 a month already, so I was really a rich man. Not really, but it was a little higher price, and I did get didn't mention that I was everybody that gets out of basic and passes, so to speak, gets a raise up to a corporal. So no, not a corporal. A private first class was my first, and then about 6 months later, I got my corporal or T5 diploma. I don't know what you call it, but there's a word for it. I can't think of it, but I get them. Yeah, so there I got. That's what I was discharged at. Was a corporal.
After you were discharged, could you come back here to Iowa? What did you do? Was it hard to readjust back to civilian life?
I was so anxious to get home, knowing I'm going home, and I don't know, I didn't dislike the Army. It's just that I wasn't ready for any more of it. So I remember one error I made in my discharging. I didn't take any of the life insurance plan that the government had for us, and it was just excellent. And it was privately run, I think, mostly, and talked to other people afterwards. And I just didn't want anything to do with the service right at that point. So I took a cash settlement, which wasn't very much, but it turned out to be very lucrative for the people that kept it. You kick yourself for not doing that, but in other words, and I was ready to come home. We got an early discharge. If I could, I wanted to go to college, but I was at Iowa State at that time. Again, I'd gone down to look for room, but there were a lot of people coming back to the campus, and I had reserved a room, went back about the time school was to start, and she had rented the room, and if any of you know where the campus is, you had to walk downtown from the campus as it was. I didn't want to do that. That's quite a walk, but anyhow, then I did not do that. I didn't go to school. I ended up farming, and I farmed for about 10 years. And then I went back to school here at VV, and got my degree in science teaching, and went up to. Is that it, or you want to go further? I don't know.
I have a question.
Yes.
You said you had your weekends off.
Yeah.
What did you spend that time doing?
Well, probably sleeping mostly, and going down to the store, and I had finally gotten legal at 18 then, and so I had a few beers while we were doing that just on camp though. That you couldn't get while you're in basic. You couldn't get any passes unless they were emergency passes, and so the pass I mentioned that we did have was at the end after we had graduated from boot camp. So yes. Do you?
Is there anything you wanted to share with us? Anything you can think of? Anything else?
You wanted me to lead up a little more all the way?
No, if there's anything else that you just want to make sure is remembered, or
from the service days, or
from your experience.
Oh, I don't know if I mentioned it. After I taught for 3 years, and then I got went on a government bill, and took a year off of teaching, and went to Grand Forks, North Dakota, at the university, and got my master's degree up there, and came back here and went to Fonda teaching, and most of my years then were. I farmed all this while after I came back, and so I farmed, and I